talking to Cornelius. Conversation 28. When your boy Jack was born in 1856, old man, there were still vivid traces of the colony's grim and brutal history. Convicts were still imprisoned in the methodical grind that was life in the Port Arthur concentration camp, and a community of the first people, scarred and depleted after their disastrous forced exile on Flinders Island, were now living at Oyster Cove in southern Tasmania. The exile had ended 9 years earlier. It did not occur without significant protest among some colonists who believed the return of the first people would only rehash the violence of the past. The numbers of the Oyster Cove community rapidly declined in the years that spanned Jack's early childhood. In 1847, there were 47 members of the community. By 1859, only 12 remained. Some commentators at the time expressed grief and regret over the decline and the conditions of the vulnerable community. Those with anthropological concerns also had an urgent preoccupation with recording the culture and language of the community, while they believed it was still possible. At the same time, boats visited Oyster Cove from Hobart with sightseers who were keen to see the Aborigines and, no doubt, hoped the visit might include some conveniently packaged cultural experience. A proud people with ancient traditions and a deep spiritual connection to the land were seen by some as little more than an entertainment to accompany a pleasant afternoon's outing. We stopped a short time to allow a party of gentlemen an opportunity to visit the Aborigines' settlement in Oyster Cove. Some dozen got in the boat, and as the tide was very low, a difficulty occurred in landing. This it was proposed to obviate by the rowers carrying the passengers ashore. The first gentleman was rather unfortunate, his bearer being a little man, while he was taller and weightier. The consequence was that the bearer stuck fast in the mud, retaining hold of his charge, who was almost precipitated into the water, but managed to reach the landing place by only going knee-deep. Some 10 minutes walking brought us to the settlement, a quadrangle with a range of wooden buildings on 3 sides. The first person we saw was Mary Ann, the Queen, a fine, portly, smiling lady about 30 years of age. The king stood close by. He is stoutly built and about 5 feet and a half high. Only 4 women were visible. We saw some half-dozen ladies, but with the exception of Her Majesty, they had all passed their prime. Some youngsters we caught taking a survey of us through a partly open door, but when our eyes were turned that way, they beat a retreat. The men were all neatly dressed. The women wore a sort of sack made from thick blue wool. Only one wore a printed dress. One of them wore a neat sort of woolen dress, fastened round her waist by a bright leather strap. Most of them had for their headdress a tall conical woolen red cap. One lady had a silk handkerchief bound round her head, inside of which, above her left ear, was stuck the well-worn pipe, ready in case of need. They asked for tobacco, cigars they would not smoke, and complained of their own tobacco being bad. Mary Ann, it appears, can read with fluency, and asked for books. She wanted something lively. She had read Uncle Tom's Cabin and pronounced it very much true. Colonial times, Hobart, 6 December 1853. A 17-year-old girl from the Oyster Cove settlement went missing and was found dead in the bush a year before this group came to visit from Hobart. Mathena had been adopted by the Franklins when she was a young girl. She was a familiar sight to Hobart residents, playing in the gardens of Government House with her pet possum, wearing her red dress and her necklace of shells. The Franklins didn't take her when they left. She spent time in institutions before being sent to the Oyster Cove settlement. Alas, there comes a time when drear thy course alone thyself must steer, thy patrons now no longer near, Mathena. Thy ballroom friends from thee are fled, admirers once so warm have sped, and sorrow bows thy once proud head, Mathena. Whoever ruled thy footsteps then made vast mistake for God and men. They sent thee to thy tribe again, Mathena. The memory of thy brilliant past thou didst with this low life contrast. The vision fled so soon, so fast, Mathena. Allowed through woods to roam away, soon thou becamest low white man's prey. In vice's night has closed thy day, Mathena. One evening came that thou camest not. They searched for thee in each wild spot in vain, till morn its rays had shot, Mathena. All day again did they explore, hill, river, valley, as before. At last they found thee by the shore, Mathena. The warmth of life long hours had fled. They took thee up all cold and dead. The river had closed o'er thy head, Mathena. So early past, now what doth seem thy young life but a troubled dream, beset with snares along its stream, Mathena. Launceston Examiner, 19th of August 1884. In the papers, the talk increasingly focused on the idea that the first Tasmanians would soon be gone forever. This was an idea that lingered through generations, even up to my own childhood. The reality of today's resilient and enduring community of first Tasmanians proves the talk of extinction was little more than a myth. But the decimating impact of European invasion, the savagery of the frontier wars, the fate of women kept shackled in huts as slaves, the cultural genocide, and the murderous nature of a forced exile, none of that is myth. All of that is fact. And yet, in the face of all that destructive impact, the culture and beliefs of the first Tasmanians endured. I am led into this line of thought from having had for many years frequent opportunities of conversing and mingling with the dark denizens of Oyster Cove, all of whom, with the exception of Lala Rook, have now passed to eternity. I've been with them in their hunting expeditions, visited them when camping around their watchfires in the bush, and surrounded by troops of dogs of all degrees and kinds. I have seen King Alexander, after receiving the fatal wound which brought him to an early termination of his reign, and conversed with him on the subject of another world. I never lost an opportunity for tracing, when possible, the effects upon them of their contact with the civilization and religion of the white man. And never, in a single instance among young or old, male or female, could I perceive the smallest indication of any beneficial change having been effected in either their ideas of this world or of the next. One man named Walter could read and write a little, affected to sing hymns, and could mechanically repeat such prayers as he was taught in the orphan school, but when speaking confidentially to anyone with whom he was familiar, the truth would out, just as it did in the case of King Alexander, when lying mortally stricken under a few sheets of bark on the old hewn track. He growled in reply to an inquiry I had made, "We want no parson, white man's religion, my country." And so it was too, even with the comparatively enlightened Walter. He would sing his hymn for the superintendent or casual visitor or parson or doctor, but in confidence he would assure you it was all white man's gammon. If our mission was to civilize or Christianize these poor heathens, we most signally failed. But we have not failed to take possession of their country. So that, strange to say, with all our power and command of means for succeeding in our Christian purposes, as ostensibly declared, we were unable to accomplish that which we asserted to be the main object of taking possession of this heathen island, while we have accomplished, to the utmost extent it is possible to achieve success, the robbery and extermination of the people. Letter from Joe Muggs, Cornwall Chronicle, Launceston, 13th of March, 1869.